Live. I think we are live. And there we are. The counter is working. So the Golf 360 rocket ship has taken off. And I'm very happy to have as a passenger tonight, Michael Jacobs, Jacobs 3D Golf. So, Michael, thank you for carving out the time to come on the show. I'm really looking
Thanks
forward
for
to it.
having me. It's a great time of year to have a nice conversation.
Yes, especially you're up in New York, as I'm sure many people you're in top 10 on the coaching list now, and moving your way up, and you're doing some very good things. And I look forward to talking all about it. But one thing I had to ask you is, you seem to stay in New York for most of the season. I'm sure you go out and do talks and lectures and things like that. But any particular reason that you never did the New York, Florida thing, or New York, New York, Texas, or go to Arizona, some warmer? Climate thing.
Maybe one day soon, but where I am I work at a club called Rock Hill Country Club. It's the only place I've ever worked. I've been here since I got out of high school and went to college and went to the PGM program.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so busy and there's so many things going on that I'm lucky enough to have everything right here. My studio, in this day and age, we all can live a pretty urban lifestyle from anywhere we live. So we spend these 3 months of the winter heavily with my golf research company, where we do all kinds of little discovery things and validation things. So we spend a lot of time on the computer in the winter.
I would have to imagine that keeps, because New York, I grew up in Michigan, and it's very busy in the summertime. People are very golf crazy. They can't wait to get out, especially, the Masters comes on. Sometimes the weather might be decent. A lot of times it might still be snowing, which is very depressing. But I would have to imagine that when you are busy in the summer, that you have to have the self-discipline to put your research projects, working on them, off for the most part until this time of year.
Absolutely.
Your mind is working to say, okay, I'm seeing this and I'm seeing this, and this winter I want to work on this to understand this more. I want to dig deeper into this. So I'd have to imagine this time of year kind of keeps you well-rounded, and that you can put a lot of the teaching aside. Maybe you have a studio that people come into, but you're more, as you said, you're more focused on digging deep into some of the things that you've seen over the past year that have been bouncing around in your brain for years, I would have to imagine.
Yeah, I'm fortunate enough to work with Dr. Nesbit, Dr. Stephen Nesbit, who's one of the most famous golf researchers who ever partook in the science of golf, and he works year round for me now. So he's always working on our programs, and I always say to him, the summer I validate him with people. Everything that we work on in the winter gets validated in the actual thing. So it's been a nice 3-month, 4-month thing to always look forward to. And everybody's like, why don't you go down to Florida and get some sun in the winter? Well, we get plenty of sun in the summer.
What anything interesting that you can talk about now that you guys might be working on, or is it you want to kind of keep it quiet until you get the results?
No, we don't keep anything quiet. But no, so what we've done is we've moved over to some proprietary motion capture systems. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to have a more defined marker set. And what I mean by that is when I have someone come in and we want to really analyze everything they're doing, we now have a 57 marker configuration on the body. And it just allows us to do more detailed work on the back, the shoulders. And by having that many markers, it helps us surround the joint better. And to actually find then with a virtual marker where the actual joint center is. So we switched over to this new marker set. We've also integrated, everything's all about ground reaction forces these days. It's like a big topic. So we integrated a forward dynamics model of ground reaction forces. So what that means is if you look at the classic equation for force equals mass times acceleration, F equals ma. Well, when people try to use motion capture to figure out what's happening and explain what's happening, they're using the right side of that equation. They're using the m times the a. So it's a known mass. They're measuring the different positions, velocities, and accelerations. And then from that, they're trying to figure out the forces on the left side of the equation that created it. When you do a forward, that would be what's called an inverse dynamics model. When you do a forward dynamics model, we know what the forces are. We know if you're on a force plate, it's there. And so what we do now is, let's say you're taking Or one of the more classic things is Patrick Harrington. Like, he's working on a couple of different moves, especially with his left foot and his left leg. And what I'm able to do is take any given swing that he has and then change the different forces that come up, the ground reaction force that comes up from the ground, to see, all things equal, how it would change effects through the,
Oh, that's
and
interesting.
ultimately if that would do anything to help or hurt. So it's kind of a way of predicting. So we're doing a couple of prediction projects, which is kind of neat to be able to see. And it just all comes down to time. So when somebody comes in, I remember when I was a young golf teacher, I gave a lot of golf lessons back, 25 years ago when I first started here. And I remember working with someone and I would say, oh, we could get this person to a certain level. Obviously, I didn't have the education, the knowledge I do now. And I used to be able to say, all right, it might take me 3-4 months. It's just so much faster now. That really, everybody says technology is so complicated. Everything you talk about is so complicated. Not really. What it allows us to do is save a lot of time and find exactly what we need to get to. And then the last part about things that we've added then would be muscle activity. So EMG analysis. And with the new motion capture system, what that allows us to do is everything is integrated. Everything is synced up, from high definition video to motion capture to ground reaction forces to whatever muscle fire pattern we're looking at. So everything is on one file for us to analyze, which is huge in the world of analytics like that. And that's
What has
basically
been
what
the
we're working on.
what has been the most interesting thing that you found in the last, let's say, couple years that you didn't
The
expect?
importance of doing a global analysis. And what I mean
And
by
what
that
would
is,
global be? Yeah.
yeah. So what I mean by that is, when you look at golf and you look at the history of instruction, it's always a discussion of parts or something like that. Or, someone will look at somebody's right elbow or their right hip or their leg, and they're looking at the different parts of the system. What I've learned the most, people ask in the last few years, is, and this is through the lens that Dr. Nesbit provided for me, is to look at the entire golfer and club as a system. So it's the holiday season, and you ever see those snow globes that, everybody always gets in the holidays? You got the snow globe, you shake it.
Shake it up. Yep.
Yeah, so picture we put the golfer in the snow globe, right? And the golfer swinging, and if the snow globe was neatly wrapped around the golfer, and then what would happen is, as the golfer took a wider backswing or raised their arms, the globe would start to grow and expand. It would grow and come back. It would like, be expanding. And then when they came into impact, it would be probably almost closer together than where it was at address. And then it
Hmm.
would expand as you go. So we look at it from that perspective, but also like a bird's eye view of this. How much does the actual globe rotate in a swing? When does the entire system turn back and then reverse and start down? So the global analysis lets you see the total of all the parts. So to give you an example, I could talk about it forever. What would help a golfer right away listening to this, right, is the fact that early in the downswing, you might see a leg or a hip or a lot of parts of the body starting to rotate forward early on in the downswing. Yet the system, because the length and stretch out of the club and how far away the club is, and as it comes closer in that area, the whole system doesn't start reversing in the downswing until much later than you would think.
Like a proximal to distal energy transfer from
Yes, yeah,
internal.
yeah. So, like, the classic proximal initiation, distal delay, and then,
Hmm.
that. But it's also a good way to think about it is, if you threw a baseball, the baseball's going through the air and it's traveling linearly, we would call it, or on a curve as it came around, but it's also spinning and rotating.
Hmm.
So the golfer inside this globe is expanding and shrinking, and also the globe itself is twisting and rotating. So
I didn't mean
Yeah.
to interrupt, but when for someone listening, if they're not watching this on YouTube, or you'll have it on I'll give you the full link for your website if you like. But what would the expanding and contraction be in reference to?
The global moment of inertia of the systems. It's just as simple as the figure skater analogy, right? If you put the snow globe on the figure skater and they brought their arms in, the globe would become really, really thin,
Okay.
right? And they would be spinning faster. And then just by spreading their arms out alone, the globe would then expand. And with the same amount of induced torque, whatever, it would just slow down because it got bigger. So what does this mean? Why we even bring it up, right, in a casual conversation like this? Well, there's a direct correlation to the skill level of a player as to when the whole globe reverses on the downswing. The later it is, the better the golfer. You can look at career earnings, career performances, and make a list of them, of all the people that we've captured. And the more money made, the more tournaments win, they all reverse the globe later. So what you take from that is when you watch someone start their downswing and you see them fire their hips and their pelvis goes, they make a lateral move forward, and you're watching this big move and everybody's trying to open up right away and drive, is understand that as you see those body parts on the best players, the whole system is still in a backswing turning mode. So the baseball going through the air, I use this analogy with my students all the time. Picture you're the baseball now and you're making a backswing. And as you go forward, it's like the pitch has started going towards home plate. We linearly push ourselves. We move a couple inches forward, but the baseball would be making a backswing rotation. The baseball would be reversing the other way. So essentially, what I'm saying is when you start your downswing and you see body parts going forward and you push yourself forward, the overall system is still making a backswing rotation.
I think Mike Granado and Sean Webb, I think, have posted, I think, a fair amount about that, to where as the body, the pressure shifts into the trail side, and it's already, once it hits about, let's say, lead arm parallel or thereabouts. I don't want to put words in their mouth. This is what I'm interpreting. So if I'm wrong, I'm happy to have them on the show and they can correct me and we'll have a good time. But as the lead arm gets to parallel in the backswing, the pressures have already shifted into the trail side, that they're already starting to move back to the target side of the body as the club and the arms are still going the other directions. Do I have that analogy of what you're describing, where the system?
That would be like a little component of it. Like that would
Okay.
just be looking at what it sounds like is the side to side pushing in a swing. And what I
Mm-hmm.
gather from what you said, that would be early on. So one thing you want to know is you can't move your body's mass center side to side, up and down, front to back without an external force. It's impossible. So if you were in space, you couldn't move yourself because we have gravity, because we have support from the ground, the support force. We can yield and propel our body, and we need an external force to help us do that. So what you're describing to me, what it sounds like there, I stay insulated from the golf industry. I don't listen to any instruction anymore because it
Mm-hmm.
just confuses me. But so we would be pushing ourselves back on the backswing, right? And then at some point here, right around that lead arm parallel to the ground, it would probably show the most weight traveling backwards. And then it's starting to slow down in that direction to then push forward.
Correct. Yeah, I
I
think
would
that's
expect.
what they were going.
Yeah, so while at that stage in the backswing, right, there would still be a lot of torque being created in the backswing direction. But what I'm talking about, this notion that we're continuing to torque backwards would happen well into the downswing till about hands or chest high in the downswing. So though you
Interesting.
see a body of a golfer really twisting around, the whole system doesn't reverse till later. People have to think about that, and it's a little complicated, but it's a huge finding.
It was that this year, within the last couple of years, you all had found that, and
Yeah, we published it in a paper called. It's on my website. It's a tough read. I know it's a tough subject.
Yeah, and the golfing world with the technology and advancements is, as you said earlier, technology is allowing things to advance much more rapidly than probably any other time in history. Is more information is out there, but uh, I'm not sure where AI sits in the golfing world yet, especially in the instructional world. But I'm sure it's going to have its impact if it hasn't started already with people already using it. Have you and Dr. Nesbit experimented with using AI with your with the
Participated
Jacobs
with
3D?
No, I participated with Golf Digest and an app and a company called Mustard as they were creating. Golf Digest was creating its own analysis with AI. I participated in making some of the educational content with them. But the big thing in AI is camera. So it's great to have all this motion capture data and all that, but if you can have a video that would sync with it or overlay it on all the data, it would be great for AI. That's really what AI needs. So I added that. So for the future, all these things we're doing also has that video component to one day utilize AI if possible.
You're very good with biomechanics as well. And if anybody watches your YouTube, gets on your website, they can watch some of those videos. I was watching some. I'd like to ask you in a little bit the one about training for speed. I thought that was very interesting, where you were checking the muscular balance and the postural correctness of somebody prior to. If you don't go cranking it up the RPM into the red zone if your body's not going to be able to handle it.
I mean, if you're not moving well, why would you want to move not well faster?
Mm-hmm. Within that idea is if you have a student that comes to you and you check them and they have some uh, imbalances, we'll call them, as far as anatomic. Their spine is crooked in a couple different planes, and they tell you, look, I'm a 16. I want to get down to a 5, and I only hit my driver 230 to 40 yards, and I want to get up. I know if I get up to 260 or 70, I can get down to single digits and so on. When somebody gets like that, do you tell them, look, if we leave your body the way it is, the amount of work you're going to have to put in to get to that level, you're looking at potentially doing some damage that's irreversible. So, do you work on getting their body, we'll call it unwound, for lack of a better term? In other words, more structurally sound
Well,
before you
what's
start?
interesting about the body is the body balances itself, so to speak. So, I was having this conversation the other day with Brian Manzella, which you brought him up before. And so just picture if I'm going to stand straight up and down, right? A common thing. So I'm standing straight up and down, I'm looking straight ahead, and I'm just hanging out, right? And it's a good thing for somebody to do who's listening and maybe have a mirror from down the line looking at you or face on. The down the line view is what I'll talk about here. So looking at myself, I'm just standing like this. The majority of people in the world will have their pelvis shifted forward on their body.
Anterior
So,
tilt.
but no, shift, anterior shift.
Huh.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the pelvis will be pushed forward. We measure when people come in, I get the exact degree of that measurement. So the majority of people will have anterior pelvic shift. Now, they're not going to just fall over like that. The body's going to balance itself out in the gravity line, and they will generally either then lean back into the lumbar, and then I'll come in and I'll notice they have a big curve, a big valley down here. And a lot of them will just rest the rib cage back and then put the head forward like this. And then you could trace it down. You'll also see a lot of people then are hyperextended at their knees or plantar flex at their ankles. And you just start to see how somebody balances themselves in the field of gravity, in the gravity line, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first thing I assess. Now your range of motion in there is probably terrible, right? So then I would say to a student or something, I would say, let's watch your. I would have already videoed a whole bunch of stuff, and then we'd go inside, and then I would have them watch themselves set up to the shot, and I would ask them, are they walking into the ball with their body in that same type of relationships that they were? And then 99% of them do, right? So then what I'll do is then we know range of motion is not great. So we know that if the parts of their body are really offset, then we know there's strains and lengthenings and shortenings somewhere that's keeping them glued. So what I will do with them is I will balance them out, and I will try to get each joint of their body to its position with the most range of motion. Okay, so I'll get their thighs and their hip joint in some type of setup position where they would have the head of the femur, which is you're on your thigh, the bone comes up, the head of the femur sits into the pelvis at the acetabulum, which is a little hole at the bottom. And when somebody's shifted forward, just think about this. They shift forward, and then this shifts as well, and they spend the rest of their life, right, in whatever joint we're discussing, impinged into a corner of it, let's say. That's how you end up getting hip replacements, knee replacements, shoulder replacement surgeries over time, because if you're not in whatever joint center that you have, if you're impinged in a corner, you're constantly hitting that spot.
Yeah, you're not wearing in the way it's supposed to be set in there to wear the longest.
No, and so just picture that person with a really hard anterior pelvis forward position, and then they go and golf from there, and then they tell me I can't. I'm early extending. I say to them, "You're early extended when you walked into the room." So I will then work the person into a golfing situation. I have to assume that, yeah, they're going to stretch, they're going to try to make themselves a better athlete and all that, but I put the person in a golf situation where there's movement potential in every joint of the body throughout the motion. And that would be the way to answer that question.
Has your study in biomechanics obviously has helped you, but do you have some, I have to assume you have knowledge and education at some level, whether it's self-learned or through courses or different certifications and so on, different ways to say, hey, here's the type of stretching you need to do, or here's a mobility work you need to do. I can kind of get you there for the remainder of this hour and a half you're going to be with me. But going forward, you're 60 years old, you've been sitting at this desk, or you've been doing this job the same way, repetitive for a career, decades, and your body has moved to a comfortable level for that movement. But if you want to play golf at the level that you said you want to get to, are you able to write like a stretching and mobility program
It's
for
more
them as well?
about them. It's actually more about them going to seek out a body worker.
Okay.
So the best way to think about this is, if you were going to put something together, right? The easiest way to put something together and keep it intact is you would use some type of fabric to put it all together, and you would also glue it, right? Those are the two things. That's essentially what your body is inside. It's all this fabric that is wrapped around, and the less you use it, the more dense that fabric gets, right? So the more you move, the better movements you make, the fabric gets a lot easier to glide on itself. If you're
Like
very
a
sedentary, which I am this time of year and proud of it, but that fabric can get much more dense. Now, people have different fabric making materials. So people who are more slender have more laxity. Like if you ever had a student or you watch someone golf, they could really hyperextend their arms, and they could do all these crazy ranges of motion. They're probably a lot less dense in their fabric than somebody like me, who's much, much thicker. People who have thicker fabric heal quicker. People who have thick fabric go through life and they say, hey, I never broke a bone. And then the loose fabric people, they break bones all the time.
mm-hmm.
And then there's also glue. Here's a pretty crude analysis, but the glue inside your body, here's the best way to think about it. You go outside on a nice cold day and your nose is a little runny, and you get that little drip, that would be glue that's really easy to glide. That's the kind of glue you want in your body. And then there's sometimes your nose is a little drier than that, a little more stuck, and it's not the prettiest sight. That would be more of glue in the body that is stuck and adhered. So it's actually more beneficial if you're an amateur golfer, or even if you're a professional, and I make all my professionals who I work with do both. It's actually better for you to go to a body worker being like a massage therapist or a or
Rolfing,
a
Rolfing for the
Rolfing
fascia.
or a myofascial release, and allow them to use their techniques to help remold the fabric, which is essentially what they're doing. They're going to get different parts here to be able to glide on each other. Because if you're stuck and you're very fibrotic, like someone like me at this stage of my life here, in my mid 40s, where my arms don't go as high and all, and I just continue to load or try to put extra strain in that, and I don't reshape the posture inside my body, it's not going to go well.
That's interesting because Ben Shear was on. I think Ben was on about 6 weeks ago, and I can't remember if we were talking in that or a week or two later. I called him about something, and he said we were discussing a little bit that he calls it muscular versus fascial type golfers, and the two easiest examples he said, John Rahm would be a muscular type golfer, obviously very thick, can deadlift. I don't know what he's deadlifting now with the.
He would be a thicker fabric person.
Yes, and you see Justin Thomas, who's, I don't know, what is he, 5'9", 165 pounds, and
That would be a more looser fabric person, less dense.
yeah. So and he said you would never train the two the same, and anybody that thought you did would be crazy. But it was very interesting. It's something, or at least sounds similar to what you're discussing, is identifying what it is for the individual, how they need to train and get their tissue work done, and then now we can not.
A good way to think about it, and this is one I share all the time, is picture you're in a boat and you got a fish net, right? And you catch a fish in the fish net. Net's nice and loose, the fish is in there. Then all of a sudden the fish starts getting tangled and starts moving around a lot. That's a lot like the fabric in the body. The muscles like the fish inside that fabric. And if that fabric gets askew, it gets tangled, and then movement becomes a lot more difficult. And then you have people over speed training, trying to do all these things while that fish in that net is completely tangled, and then their body sells out to other movements that are not the greatest for them.
Yeah, and it gets programmed in there, and then they come to you, and it's like, okay, how
A
long?
golfer is going to sell out movement. What I mean by sell out movement is if I'm looking for some type of range of motion that I'm supposed to get out of my right hip joint and I'm not getting it, I'm going to I'm going to put some more range of motion into a different part of my spine, so to speak, or my knee. It's a movement,
Interesting.
it's a nice movement puzzle.
If biomechanics is a science of itself, are the different biomechanics that various instructors, and you have yours, I know obviously Mike Adams is very popular with his biodynamics, I think that he was calling it. Tishler's been on the show, he has his biomechanics. Do biomechanics differ, the theories, amongst high-level coaches like yourself or people who
Yeah,
use them in their measurement?
I think so, 100%. Yeah.
And is it just a different interpretation of the field or the discipline of biomechanics?
Well, there's a million different ways to analyze a system. It depends on the complexity of the model that you choose to analyze, but nothing takes the place of really understanding the human anatomy and the different, what you're dealing with the person in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of what we've seen in golf, this might sound a little harsh, what's in the golf industry now from a biomechanics perspective is like McDonald's. It's just a very basic cookie cutter. This is the sequence of how you push your body. This is the kinematic sequence of how you do this. This speed of this, and it's a very basic model. So the complexity of it is a big deal. But I would say they're very different. I would expect everybody to have different. Would you expect two cardiologists to give you the same diagnosis? Probably not.
No, it's just a difference in either how they were taught, how they learned, what they learned, and yeah, it's going to have different things for different people. I do find it very interesting that figuring out how somebody is supposed to move, in other words, swing. But let's say they're one and the same. How you're going to swing is based off how you move. I think everybody agrees on that. It's well, if you take the just to jump off topic a little bit, if you take what seems to be the big argument to some extent in the golf and coaching world right now is in the chipping and the short game, where you have one smaller camp saying you can be much more shallow, let's say 6 degrees to anywhere from 2 to 6 degrees down, and the other camp is saying, no, you should be 10 degrees or more down. And my
Well,
question,
what's interesting about the short game is, from a biomechanics standpoint, is there's very little speed, so the person can manipulate a lot of it. So, I mean, probably can easily perform both, and then the results of what's better is whatever. But when it comes to biomechanics of full propulsive movement, if you're a little off in that, then you could actually hurt somebody. Nobody's
yeah,
going to get hurt with 3 degrees of difference of a chip shot. But if somebody's over speed training from a very misaligned fibrotic body, bad news. Bad news.
my question to the two camps, or anybody that falls into the two camps of the chipping discussion, would be, well, I would think, because both, there have been people who've been successful, I think, with both theories, or at least they have proven to be successful, or else the coaches who are professing those ideas wouldn't be where they are, or have the success they do, or at least their students would have the success. And along the topic of the biomechanics we're talking about, it's like, well, my first question to both sides is, you're obviously both successful. Have you found out something that determines whether somebody should be a little more steep or should be a little more shallow? Like, are they shallow in their full swing with their irons? And this golfer is more steep. So we found that there's a predisposition. If you're steep in your full swing, you'd be better off in your short game. If you're shallow in your full swing, you'd be better off shallow in your chipping. So as long as along this discussion, I'm not asking you on your opinion. I don't want to throw you into that argument.
That would be what you would call, not so much biomechanics, you would call that practice-based evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So you're creating your evidence from practice, which is probably better from a short game. It's probably better to be that way, in an everyday thing. The only reason we do what we do is just because we do, because we're just super curious, and it's just a hobby of mine to make Dr. Nesbit take these things to a level that nobody ever even thought to look at.
Much
But
deeper. It seems like you guys are going very,
oh,
very
you
deep.
have no idea. You have no idea. The man, for 4 straight years, he's worked full time for me doing it, and he's written hundreds of thousands of lines of program, and we test everything. Like, I'll give you an example. If I want to see, let's say, Patrick Harrington, we actually did his contribution from, let's say, the left side of his body versus the right side of his body. That was a big thing that really helped over time. Not only was I able to break down exactly what the left side versus the right side was able to do, I was able to then also go in and increase what the right side was doing to see what would happen to the left and to the whole system. And I'll tell you, it was the 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 modeling of seeing what was possible was spot on when we actually did it. So, like, one of my favorite analytics is to see a body part relative to another body part. And what I mean by that is, like, let's say the chest relative to the upper arm. So during the swing, your chest is moving, right?
Mm-hmm.
And your upper arm is moving. They're both moving. But there's also a movement of this relative to that. It gives you an idea of what's happening maybe in the shoulder joint or what have you. Now, if I go like this, if you're watching, you can see this. If you're not watching, what I'm doing is I have my arm up in the air like I'm making a muscle, and then I rotated my chest, and my arm and my chest moved somewhat together. And then you start to look at this, and now I'm changing my arm a little. How much of this movement is coming from this part of the body, or is it the arm itself? So one of the ones I like to do is we actually can put a virtual camera on the body segment and then watch as if this is still. It's moving, but we put it in a still reference frame, and we watch the pure movement of the other segment relative to that throughout the motion. And that's been very helpful to see how much a body part moves relative to each other. And especially when it comes to speed and all that, you might have a situation where somebody's coming down, and in their transfer of speed, they might be moving, like you said before, the more proximal segment too long, and the distal one isn't overtaking. So being able to see the system as a whole and then go in and see the relative movements, assessing how dense someone's fabric is within their body is what we've been doing.
Do you think that the focus on speed in the last couple of years and then training for speed has gotten to a point where it's can be detrimental to the golfer regardless of skill level? Or
People been increasing their speed out there?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Have people been increasing their speed on an overall?
That's hard to say. I wouldn't know. I don't have access, but I think Bryson was the one that brought it to the forefront with what he did in that one off
Patrick
season.
Harrington is much faster now than any time in his career.
Yeah,
Not
and Harrington is obvious. So if you use those two as the biggest names who have done it, and seemed like for a little while, Rory I think got caught up with chasing speed, and I think he said he had to pull back on it. I mean, when you're hitting it, air carrying at 310 already, why do you need another 10 yards? But in just looking at the game in general, that in some of the physios and the trainers and people in that part of the industry have been on the show, their fear was that lighter shafts, longer clubs, more golf, and then you add on speed training. And if you go to the pro level, less time off. There's not like, when we're close to the same age, when we were, the tour championship used to end around the end of October, and then the tour didn't pick up again until mid-January.
Oh, yeah, no,
so there was a dedicated, couple months off where now there's really no time off. And you have these players training faster, longer, harder, etc., chasing or wanting more distance. It seems like it might have been it's toned down a little bit, maybe because some of these doctors, physios, and people who really know the body like yourself are saying, hey, you're not ready or you're not in a position to start ramping this thing up to 9,000 RPM. And if you do, you run a very high risk of blowing out your engine. Let's get the body right first.
Yeah, let's move well better. I think the whole overspeed training thing is just overhyped.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have everybody showing up with speed sticks in their bags? Yeah, they all have speed sticks in their bags.
Well, it's like the home run. Everybody wants to see it. They all want to hit it past. And well, I mean, we're guys, whether they like to admit it or not, are very vanity driven. So if they can outdrive their buddy in their weekend foursome, they're going to be roostering where they're walking around with their chest out a little bit further because they outdrove their buddy by 10 yards for the entire season.
One of my best players, aside from the tour players, is a kid who came to me at age 12 from China, and he's like my little brother. So it's as if I ever raised a little brother, this was it.
Mm-hmm.
Never asked him to speed train. Never speed trained. And I kept telling him that you'll get there. Just keep healthy movement. He did all healthy work, and he cruises at 180 ball speed, and never speed trained.
I found it interesting when I was in the club business. I was an assistant pro, and I practiced fairly good amount. Basically in season, most every day that you weren't in the pro shop, you're out hitting balls. But what I found interesting was when I went to play full time, within about 4 months of just hitting balls on a more regular basis more often, I picked up almost a club.
But hitting balls is huge.
Yes, and then when you're around players who are swinging, they're taking it up a notch as far as their effort and their forces that they're putting in, harder, faster, etc. Without even speed training, I think I picked up probably 2 clubs on the irons and 40 yards on the driver just by the end of that season.
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, I could definitely see that. I think a big thing when you're over speed training is you can't worry about where you hit it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, definitely.
I mean, I'd be very curious to see where that part of the industry goes this season. As now, I think it's in about its 4th year.
Everybody comes here talking clubhead speed because of what happened to Patrick Harrington after he came, mm-hmm. And I'm the most non-likely person to teach you speed. But I will help you get the most out of what you have.
Was that something that when he came to you, was that something that he was focused on and that you helped him with? Or was that
he's always focused on it. He doesn't like to give up a mile an hour. I do remember when he first came and the first discussion was he could have 190 ball speed almost. He was 48 or something or 49 when he came. But he could also, on the next shot, have 163. There wasn't the consistency of it.
What was the reason for that? Are you allowed to?
There was a lot of reasons. There was a lot. His body mass is 7 inches more forward now than where it was at impact, which is a lot.
That's quite a bit. Yeah.
It's a lot.
Especially for someone who's, I always find it amazing and have a lot of respect for coaches and / instructors, whatever term someone wants to put on it, that can take a world-class golfer like Patty and make him exponentially better when most people would say to get him, the person at that level, to be 1% better is astronomical. But to get them to go from swinging 165 to 180, that's huge.
It is. It is. And it's also one of the other friends of mine who I help with his swing is Jason Duffner. And Duffner, we had a conversation last time he was here, and he made an awesome point. And I just love talking to these guys and getting what they have seen in all these years. And I think for a lot of these guys at the stage of their career, past 38 years old, let's say, they're not performing like they were. And it was a lot easier for them in their 20s or their 30s. They could probably have taken a swing tip from a coach or something, or tried something, and probably strike the ball just as well, maybe a little better here and there. But it didn't really matter doesn't really matter what they do at that stage. And then there's some type of turning point where they try to figure out how they did it, and then it's an interesting battle from there.
Yeah,
That's been an interesting conversation.
it's like a completely different mindset. So you bring up the point that does that fall into, well, the body is now 15 years older, and it's,
It's less
as you
elastic,
mentioned,
I would think. Yeah,
it's not as
it
elastic,
could
it's
be
not
less
moving.
elastic. Yeah,
Or is it a brain thing to where they're on autopilot? By the time they start playing when they're a kid, by the time they get to 25, even up to 30, most things are on autopilot, where they're pointing and shooting. Maybe a tweak here or there, their coach work on some minor changes. But when you start to get older and things don't work the same, now that you go into self-analysis maybe instead of that point and shoot mentality, and now it's a spiral that golfers can get themselves into. And I mean, Jason is a prime example to go from major championship winner, and it seemed like he was the hottest golfer in the world for a while, and he's working his way back, from what
I
I can
think he's going
tell.
to make a good comeback. Yeah,
And
injuries don't help either.
no, I'm very aware of that one. I'm a walking.
Also, a little coldness in the putter could set someone back.
Now, I want to touch on it, at least have you talk about it. I'm sure we could do a whole series. Anybody that has seen you on social media or read your books, watches your YouTube channels, you have the airplane on the shaft, and you have the Jacobs 3D, the alpha, beta, and gamma forces through the shaft. So I guess if we can do an introductory
Yeah, sure. So when I was
version of what
studying,
those things are.
sure, when Dr. Nesbit was still at Lafayette College, I would go there a few times a year. I was getting my education, so to speak, and the conversation of how a club moves, well, any object, is you can tie it to how an airplane will tilt, will pitch up and down, yaw side to side, and roll. We were always, in the papers, it's a alpha rotation, which is side to side, which is like a yaw. It's like the plane going side to side.
Mm-hmm.
Beta is the pitch. That's as if the nose of the plane is going up or down. Gamma is the roll along the line, as if the plane rolled. So, pitch, roll, and yaw, alpha, beta, gamma. Those are all common terms that are used. Alpha, beta, gamma is just the first three letters of the alphabet in Greek. Um, so we kept talking about it. Pitch, roll, and yaw. Pitch, roll, and yaw. Golf club rotates, moves through space, and also rotates. And then I got in the car. It was like a 3-hour drive back. My mind was always fried. And then I'd go get a Slurpee. That was my one Slurpee I would always go and get a Slurpee. So I'm getting a Slurpee, and I look over, and there's a Hobby Lobby. And I said to myself, maybe they sell like a little toy airplane in there. I'll put it on the club, and then I can see the pitch, roll, and yaw. So I go in there, I find a styrofoam airplane, I get some duct tape, and I did it in the parking lot. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I'm calling Manziel, and I was like, I came up with a great idea. So I thought I came up with the greatest idea, and then the golf world tortured me because somebody put an airplane on a club in like 1971 or something. It wasn't an original idea. Okay, great. But yeah, that's where that came from.
It's
So
forgotten
the
ideas.
airplane's a nice way to see the different, you can see how your club moves around you, and you can see how it pitches up, moves side to side, and rolls during the swing. With the roll being a big key for club face control.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the airplane analogy comes from.
I find it, you mentioned club face control, and I think the coaching industry got a little hung up for a little while at least, or it seemed like it. People tried to get to go down that avenue, the rate of closure discussion, especially when Victor Hovland was playing really well. I think he had the lowest rate of closure. That is it Ping, because I think he's a Ping staff member. I think it's lowest that they measured, and all these younger coaches in our area were asking me, "Well, yeah, we need to change our swing to get lower rate of closure." I said, "I
Yeah,
think,
that was a popular thing. Yeah,
yeah, I think, and
Manzella was on me about that. We added a when we added a so-called rate of closure into Jacobs 3D, first I presented it to our guys, Dr. Nesbit, such as, well, how would you define it, and what metrics would you use? There's a couple of different ways that you could consider it on what's important into it. So we've included them all to see the differences.
well, I think Colin Montgomery had one of the highest. That was what I was told. I haven't looked into it myself, but if that's the case, and people are arguing, well, you have to have low rate of closure. I said, well, Colin had one of the highest rate of closures or the largest ranges, and he won the Order of Merit. I don't know, was it 7 or 8, 10 times, something crazy. I said, I think that's kind
The
of
Hall of Famer.
yeah, it's a Hall of Famer, and he did what he did in the Ryder Cup and everything else. I said, do you really want to go spend your time running down a rabbit hole trying to shave yourself point zero some degrees of rate of closure or within a tenth of a second time frame? I said, I think you got maybe go work on your short game a little more, and and use your time more wisely. But
Yeah, there's very whenever you see something like I was talking about before about the whole movement of the whole snow globe.
mm-hmm.
When you see something like that, where you throw enough of things like rate of closure, blah blah blah, whatever the case may be, and then you see something that comes up, and it's so the comparisons of players are so glaringly different. You have to keep poking around until you find those types of things.
When you see things like that are so different, whether it's a rate of closure or whether it's a steep pattern on their full swing or a more shallow pattern, and you have all these different variables that pop up that it seems like segments of the coaching world try to gravitate towards and then use that to reinvent the entire swing instruction model. How
Yeah,
do
I
you,
think I think it's what worked for them when they were in a
yeah,
play.
how do you at the level that you've reached and the players that you teach, and you teach from tour pros all the way to weekend golfers and everybody in between, how do you number one, have the self discipline to not reach out for the shiny object and stay the course? And then how do you also have the discipline, or maybe it's the curiosity that you continue to do the research that you do to find out what I guess are the real things that you see are real tangible items within the golf swing and the
Well, I
coaching
mean,
world
if
that can be used.
you took 5 people, right, and we took them to the mall, and we asked them to walk around the mall, and we studied how they walked around the mall and moved, everyone would have a little different arm swing. Everyone would have a different movement, a different leading push. Everybody would have completely different kinematics.
Mm-hmm.
So I expect everybody to have completely different kinematics. So I don't come in with the notion that they should do this or that. I do come in with the notion of a somewhat expected rotation of the club throughout the swing on how that pitch roll and yaw of the airplane is going to work during the swing.
Mm-hmm.
That I do. Because I think that's the instrument of golf, the club, so that has some type of movement pattern. But I don't expect any kinematics when somebody comes.
But when you look for the pitch and roll and everything in the golf club, do you keep a window in mind that golfers should fall into based off their skill level? Like tour level players and even maybe Division One should have a certain range that all three of those fall into, and then maybe single digits to other golfers would have another window that they could fall into. So you're working within these windows based off their skill level, or how do
Not
you do it
really,
different?
not really, because everybody's players at every level do all different types of kinetics. What I would look for, to give you an example, would be a lot of, like, let's say the club is going to rotate a certain amount during the swing in one direction. It's going to pitch a certain way during the swing. Let's say it's going to change pitch 20 degrees on the backswing, the nose, right? And then it's
Mm-hmm.
going to come down to impact, right? We'll call impact 0. I would say, okay, this person's pitching at 20 degrees. I maybe expect them, we're going to get this pitch down to 18, whatever the case may be. I would look at that and then say, from going from that 18 to 0, what's happening and how soon is that happening? What rate is that happening? And the timing of that change. So if somebody's making a move early in the downswing in a different direction, like let's say they're driving their hands out towards the ball line this way, they're coming like this, they have very, very limited time or chance to change the pitch of the club in that direction. So I would look at the movements and then look at the time intervals of how they're changing.
Very interesting. Can you give an example like of the time that is changing?
Yeah, the biggest thing I would say that I see the difference is I got my remote control in my hand here, and I brought it up to the top of my swing, right? And
Hmm.
here I am, the remote control's over my right shoulder, so I have to drive the club this way. I have to bring the club down and drive it that way. If I drive it this way early on, the way I'm gonna bring it down is gonna have a totally different kinetic and kinematic experience than if I brought it down and then I drove it out. So I'm
So,
watching the components and then seeing how they would blend all the movements together.
so it is most, and I think it's dissipating to some extent. You go back to the '80s. You had the body model versus the arm model, and you had all these different models, and then you got through into the late '80s and the '90s, and you had these different theories on swings, and people would gravitate towards what they thought would work best. In learning more about your system, it's not so much about teaching a model; it's about how does this person move, what are they doing, and where can they improve on how they're moving the golf club and themselves through space, that I can improve them, that I'm seeing these inefficiencies. So where I think if I modified these or got them to do it this way, it would be more efficient. Is that somewhat of a decent
100%.
appraisal?
Movement hygiene.
That's a very good way to say it. The one of the unique things that I learned about your system through some mutual friends is as we talked about it very early on, the ability to capture more parts of the body moving, whether it's centered on a joint or the center point of a joint or different parts of the body. That a lot of these systems use 8 cameras, and I believe you guys are using 12. Obviously, that's 50% more, and I have to imagine that the information that you're getting back, as far as we'll call it the input into your brain computer and how you're going to output what this individual is supposed to do to improve their swing, that's got
Yeah, I
to be a
mean,
hell of a lot more efficient.
we were very successful with 8 cameras. We have 14 now, and what the 14 allows us to do, essentially, what we're looking for is the 3 stages of position. So you have something in position, and then it changes position, and we look at that over time, and we get the velocity, and then we look at that change in velocity over time. We get that acceleration. The more cameras, the better markers allows us to get to that derivative of acceleration the smoothest possible way. The capturing system that we have now is really fantastic.
You had mentioned you had gone to PGM for college.
I did, yeah.
Which one did you go to? I'm just curious.
Methodist University.
Down the Carolinas. I went to Ferris back in the
Oh,
early
nice,
'90s.
nice.
Yeah,
I got accepted to Ferris, and I looked at my folks and I was like, "Let's go warmer."
that was one thing we used to say, because when let's say I went there in '90 to '94, and back then New Mexico State had been around for a little while, because I've known Marty Chuck for, God, it's coming up on 37 years. I think. I
Yeah,
think
we
I was
just did a golf school together here.
I think I was 16, and he was at New Mexico State. So I knew in New Mexico State. And I think Mississippi State and Penn State had just started in '89 or '90. So back then there were four, and I don't know how many there are now, 30 something. But we used to sit there around, Thursday, Friday evening, and saying, who was the genius that decided to come up to put a golf school in the northern part of Michigan?
In
It,
fairness,
it made zero sense.
Ferris was the first one. It was the Harvard of.
Yeah, the Harvard of golf school. Heard that a million times, and we just sit there and scratch our heads, say, why here? And how the hell did we end up here? I mean, for me, it was in-state tuition, so that was an easy decision. But looking back, I always wanted to go somewhere south, but they didn't have any other. I wasn't going to Mississippi. I didn't know anybody down there, so I was
Yeah,
going
I applied to
to at least hang out
Mississippi.
there.
Yeah, but I
But
chose.
yeah, good place. I know a lot of good golfers and a lot of good coaches that come out of there.
Yeah, and I got to give credit to Jerry Hogg, who ran. I still keep in touch with him, and one of the classes he had was science of the swing, and he had a physics professor in there, and we did science of the swing, and the physics professor. That's how it all started for me. I was 19 years old, and that's what got me going. So I thank him all the time.
That's still one of my favorite books. Was it Physics of the Golf Swing? Jorgensen?
Yeah, that's the Jorgensen one. No, the textbook in the class we had was Science of the Swing. Not Science.
Hmm.
That's my book. Search for the Perfect Swing.
That was another good one. That was very enjoyable. It's interesting. I have a student. He likes to read, and we talk about that book. And I said it's kind of interesting that that book is now, I think, 40-ish years old. But they were talking about D plane and all these things back then, and so many golfers think that all this stuff is new. I was like, well, no, physics doesn't change. It's
Yeah,
been around for a long time.
they all had more of a simplified model, which is expected because they didn't have computers like we do today. And then, the swing was always deemed circular enough where
Hmm.
you can, model it as a circle. And then Dr. Nesbit came along, and he always says that, they looked at him with 10 heads and he thought he was going to get thrown out. That his first discovery in all of this, in all of his golf research, was the fact that the little bit of non-circular part of the swing is probably the most important characteristics. And then, it went from there.
Why do you think that his work is not more readily known? Is it just because he doesn't feel the need to promote it, or is it?
In the golf science world, it's the
it
most cited of all papers.
but as far as like as it trickles down to the masses, let's say, you got guys like
But
yourself.
he's not a sell. He's not looking to sell and make his cash. He's not preying on that I'm the smart guy preying on the non so smart. No, he doesn't do that.
I've noticed that about people who are exceptionally smart, gifted, talented, fill in the blank, whatever you want to, respectfully, that they're so in tune with what they do and have such a focus on their expertise in their profession that any advertising, marketing, or getting themselves out to promote, even though it would, I think, be to their benefit to some extent, you can't.
That's not
You
the way
can't
they look
jump
at
on.
it. Like a lot of them look at
I've
it.
noticed.
I personally think that a lot of them don't think it's ethical to
Yeah.
commercialize. You work behind the scenes. That they don't ethical in the sense that as a PhD in a subject, you don't go espouse your opinions
Hmm.
in social realms.
Is it more you just report your findings
Yeah, you report your
or
findings.
facts?
Yeah, yeah. Bring if there's a problem to be solved, you solve it, and then there's your findings.
How did you and Dr. Nesbit get connected?
A bunch of golf pros all went down to visit him, 2010 or 9, and he and I kind of hit it off. We were chatting, and then I asked him if I could come back, and I went back by myself, and then kind of blossomed from there. And then in 2015, we started our own company together, Golf Research, and so it's been 10 years.
What was it at that time? Because it wasn't, things weren't as readily available as they are today. What was it, you and people in the group that went to see him?
Yeah,
You
he wrote it. We were all reading his papers.
okay?
I remember having his papers, a long time ago,
Hmm.
uh, in those science and golf books, the old science. So I thought he was going to be some crusty old guy because those books are from the '90s, and guy's he's in great shape. He's a lot younger than I thought when I met him.
From a fundamental standpoint, you talk to enough people who are very good at what they do. You sought out Dr. Nesbit. I had Scott Calks on a couple of times and learning his history and how he sought out individuals in various parts of that are now just like it's expected that about like biomechanics and all these other things and wrist movements and anatomy and all this, but they don't. A lot of people don't understand it. Back in the '90s or early 2000s, this wasn't readily available all over the place like it is now. But the
Not in the
people who
golf industry.
no,
Yeah,
no, and the people who are at the highest levels had the initiative to seek these things out, whether they were introduced to it in some way, shape, or form
yeah, sure.
in their career, but they took the initiative to pursue it. And you see a common denominator of people who are very successful. It's like they're taking the initiative. They're not waiting for things to come to them.
But
Or
no, they're
else all
very
you're doing
curious.
all you're doing is getting, usually if you're like that type, all you're doing is getting something regurgitated and then you're repeating it. You're not an original thinker. You're not giving anything some deep thought to say, well,
It's
how,
hard. You got
given
to
what I've seen.
dedicate. You got to dedicate a lot of time
Hmm.
to teach a full calendar and to also spend so much time trying to get better at the craft. It's almost like you can't have a life.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, you have to make your living. You have your day job, I call it, whatever. So someone's working the counter, they're working the lesson tee, or they're whatever they're doing, and then you go home. Especially if you have a family, now you got your family responsibilities, and then maybe instead of watching TV at night, you get online and you read something, and with all the information out there, and as you said, different doctors, different coaches, different scientists are going to look at something similar and interpret it different. You know, and so if you're a young assistant and you want to get to the level of Michael Jacobs and you're reading online and constantly in the back of your head, you got to be thinking, well, damn, this sounds really good, but with all the information out there, how do I know if I'm reading the right thing outside of going out and testing it on your students?
There's no way to know. You just got to keep doing it. You just got to keep doing it. You just got to keep plotting along. The anatomy topic is a big one. It's a big field of study. It takes a long time. But I tell all my friends who start to get into it, it took me years to, get better at it and understand it all. But if you learn one thing a day, that's what I did at first. I took one thing a day. Like, let's say, on the deviation of the wrist, what muscles were involved, how it worked. And I just thought about that for a whole day. That's all I did. If I needed a second day, that was great. And if I did that every day, I'm 365 smarter in 1 year. And I just focus on one thing a day until you really nail it down.
Yeah, and I think that the things, and I know I was guilty of it. I tell friends the story that I used to love. I think it was on there was a biography channel, and I used to watch. I'd get home from work this time of year because I'm off of Hilton Head, so we have golf year round, and I would get home, especially after the time change. And about the time I got home, it was about 7 o'clock. The show would come on. It was a biography of all these successful people: Sam Walton and the Woolworth estate, and all these old time, extremely successful people, well before the Teslas and the Musk and the Bezos and all that. I'm going to date myself a little bit, but what I had always thought as a young kid, you see these successful people and said, man, they must have just done things perfectly to continue to advance
No,
the way they. And then I watched this series over and over for a whole season, and I was like, these people went broke 4, 5, 6, 10,
you don't
12
turn
times.
shiny till you've been raked over the coals 100 times.
Exactly. And it's like they've made countless mistakes. And
Yeah.
it's like trying to understand that as a young, I think, assistant or even a young kid or someone trying to become they're listening to this in Des Moines, Iowa, or in Seattle, Washington, or Naples, Florida, and they say, man, I really want to be a coach. I just don't know what direction to go. There's so much information to take in. It's like, well, just take in what you can, and as you said, learn something and understand it's going to be a career, it's a journey. You're not in this for a sprint. You're not going to. If you can sprint and out teach or out coach anybody in your small area, well, then you got a state, and then you got a region, they got to across a nation, then you got across the globe, and it's like
I
there's so
tell
much information.
Brian Manzella, this is the one he loves telling the most. We're sitting there one day, we were having this conversation, and he says, "Where would you start? If you were telling somebody you're gonna, you wanted to teach golf or you want to become a big golf teacher." So, well, you either settle in for 20 years and learn, or go take acting lessons and do the sprint and become an actor. That's your two choices. We got plenty of
The
actors.
I will say that one thing that golf coaches are very good at is because just about all of them were there was allowing younger coaches to shadow them or at least come watching for half a day or a day. Some have made mentor or apprenticeship programs that they'll do it for longer. Do you do anything like that with some
Yeah,
young
when people are
members?
interns, yeah. But it's also you're dealing, a lot of customers
Hmm.
when they're paying a pretty decent fee for a lesson that probably don't want to have somebody bouncing around. So, if somebody's an intern working here, but that's about it. It's
Makes
just not
sense.
fair to the student.
I remember Rick Barry, who is still at Sea Pines. He's been there since I think 1987. When I was a young 19, 20 years old and I wanted to get into teaching, I used to always ask if I can come see him. He said, well, I got to check. Let me make sure that the students are okay with somebody.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah.
And I was respectful enough that I just stayed 10 feet away and would listen and make sure I was not in the way of the camera and do what I needed to do. But that's kind of how I got. And then Don Trahan was at Harbortown, and he had tour pros that would come in. So I would sit 20 feet away because I was supposed to be working, but I would go listen to them for 10, 20 minutes at a time. So it was that's how I kind of got started into the teaching and coaching world. Like I would just sit in and listen when unless and try not to be a dumbass and say, "Hey, can I ask you a question in the middle of somebody's
No,
lesson?"
you can't do that.
I want to ask you because I'm sure a lot of people out there, young coaches in particular, you're well known to have been helping Patrick, and we mentioned him a little bit. How did that meeting come about?
20, I got a phone call. Someone asked if I would take on a new client, and it was Patty.
Hmm.
Um, he was trying to figure out his 3D data to better get club head speed, I guess, more consistent. And then somebody recommended I take a look. We had a Zoom call and we looked at swings, and then we took it from there.
What is for some out there who aspire to be at a level that you are and teach some of the best players in the world? What is one of the biggest differences in working with somebody at that level compared to working with somebody who, say, wants to get into college and play golf, or somebody who's mini tour pro and they want to play at the next level, or just an average Joe and wants to get down to single digit? Can you speak to maybe some of the
Where I
glaring
tell you,
differences?
the best players are so in tune to themselves. It's unbelievable. Like one of my very good friends who I help with his swing, Steve Elkington, I'll bring something up. He's so intuitive. He'll go hit some balls. He'll make a little video for me in the morning. It's so funny. Be sitting there in his FootJoys and his workout outfit, and he'll make me a little video of what he's going to work on today, and I'll respond back. And he'll go out and play or hit, and he'll come back with exactly the type of feedback you're just like, holy cow, how did he come up with that? That's exactly what I would. They're just so in tune,
Hmm.
and you take somebody. One of the most interesting things about all these guys is I'll have them ask them to do something, and then they'll like it and they'll be, incorporating it. And then they'll say, in 1991 or 2002, from July 1st to August 15th, this is exactly what I was doing, and I was hitting the ball. But they remember everything. Their memories are unbelievable. Work ethic is ridiculous.
Isn't that amazing? That golfers in particular, whether tour level or otherwise, that they can remember shots that they hit on certain holes and certain time. They could tell you the weather and probably the time that they hit the shot, but they can forget their spouse's or birthday or anniversary like it was nothing.
Yeah, they're very, very in tuned. Very in tune.
Do you are there any levers that you have to pull with them? Like if you're sensing some kickback that they're giving you on something that you know that they need, and maybe they're giving some resistance as to making that adjustment, is there any type of levers, or
Yeah,
how do you get
I
them to?
always I always summarize it as, well, that gets my vote, but my vote, I guess, doesn't count. That's what I say. I don't have to go and hit it.
Do you get vetoed often, or do they finally come around and say, "Okay, yeah, Michael, you're right. I should have. I'm
Might
here, and I
take
know
a
you're."
while. It depends on the person. Might take a while. Some of them like to go to their other coaches or their physical trainers first and validate things. Just
Do you find it's players at that level, and you hear it every week, that the only times that players really at that level make a mistake. I mean, the swing has its ups and downs a little. They're going to hit it really good one week, and really good at that level compared to so good is for them is big, but for the average golfer sitting at home wouldn't be able to comprehend that. But do you think it's because once they make the commitment, they stick to it, and the only times that they do get in trouble is when they don't make 100% commitment?
yeah. I mean, attitude is huge for them. Whatever attitude and mindset they take out there, you got to have all the shots. You got to be able to play all the shots at that level, all of them.
Hmm.
I talk to Elk all the time, and he's made over 400 cuts in his career, and you look at that every week, grinding it out, and you don't feel good, and you got to still go play, and it's not glorious.
No.
The big key that if there was one thing I would say, if somebody's listening to this and they're an average golfer, let's say things go a little awry. Those players are turning a 74 into a 69. And the everyday golfer is turning their 90 into 100 when things go awry.
Hmm. Yeah, they seem to get frustrated and then just let their emotions run away with them. Where we'll call it experienced golfer can curb it, and the best players can turn it around, and then, at least get it to the clubhouse so that they can get to the range or the green or wherever they're going
And not enough is talked about putting, you know, the putting stats.
to. What do you wish that more people knew about the cost of success? As somebody who's very successful, has taught a lot of successful people, is there something that, because people look at it and say, "Oh, look at Michael. I know he worked hard," but or they look at an Elon Musk, or they look at a Ryan Manzella. What do you wish that most more people knew about the
You have to
cost of
be
success?
you got to be relentless. It's just relentless. You have to be relentless.
Do you for yourself? Does being relentless come from really enjoying what you do and the
Apparently,
curiosity?
apparently, I would hope so. I like trying to figure things out. I like submersing myself into a subject.
Does that come from, as we talked about earlier? You have the teaching that you're fully dedicated to during your season, and then you have the full dedication to research and testing and
Yeah, I mean,
putting out papers.
I also, I spend a lot of time in my golf shop. I'm still the traditional head pro. I own my own golf shop and run a course. So I always
Yeah,
thought,
that's what I was going to ask you as well. Is how do
I
you
always,
do
I
all
always
these
feel,
things?
well, I feel like that's really important. I love a lot of my golf teaching friends, but I see them getting a little bit out of reality what goes on in real golf courses and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've enjoyed that part of it and having my golf shop and standing in there and trying to sell a pair of slacks before I go out and teach or something. Uh, I'm going to try to do that for as long as I can, just to be a part of the mix.
Does that give you a little break away from the teaching and coaching to let your mind kind of
But
have a break and divert it to something else, and then when you
yeah,
go back, it's a little more fresh?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's all part of golf.
Mm-hmm.
You get in the morning, send out a golf outing of cops and firemen, and then go teach a major champ. It's great. It's great.
Just a day in the life of Mr. Jacobs.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
What would you say is the biggest lesson you learned from the game of golf?
Play it as it lies. You got to play it as it lies.
And that goes for everything.
You can't change your lie, and you got to play it as it lies.
And then I know we're winding down on time, but one last question this is a kind of a newer one that I've come up with is, it might sound simple, but I'm very curious to hear people's answers on this going forward. And that is, what do you think makes you so good at what you do?
I hope I do a good job. Preparation. I always thought in the back of my mind, I taught a lot, and everybody used to say, "Oh, yeah, he's a top 100 teacher," but he never really taught anybody of importance. He just sits out there on Long Island and teaches the Hamptons crowd, and I just never tried to seek out people to teach or anything, but I just always told myself that when the situation arises, I have to be fully prepared. That
Mm-hmm.
one day when somebody comes and they ask me, I have to be able to answer every question they have. So it's
And
preparation.
when you know that might be a year, or you don't know if it's a year or 5 years or 10 years or 15 or 20 or whatever, how long it's going to be, what what is it that allows you to keep going with that preparation, that you don't just give up and say, this isn't ever going to happen, to hell with it, I can go in the pro shop and I can have a comfortable living, my family, and I don't have to continue to burn the candle at both ends, etc.
Just keep going. I don't know any better.
Just your DNA.
Yeah, it was always curious to me when I was a kid, and I was a good golfer, and then I took lessons from a famous golf teacher, and I got worse,
Mm-hmm.
and it just didn't make any sense to me, you know. So I guess that inspired it to keep digging. I guess I enjoy it. What can I say?
Enjoy a little bit of self-induced torture that pushes you to continue to learn
Yeah,
and have a curious mind.
solving problems.
I think we share that, and the genesis might have come from a similar place, in that when I was younger, I took some lessons from somebody who was highly regarded as, whether top 5, 10, 20, I don't know where he would have fallen in that spectrum, but I kept asking questions like a 4-year-old, like, why are you having me do this, or why having me? I'm sure I probably drove him crazy.
Right.
But to me, if you're going to tell somebody to do something for their benefit, you probably should know the reason that you're doing that, outside of
Absolutely.
just teaching a framework of what you think the swing should be. Back then, we didn't have the science that we did today. Like when you're working with somebody, you can say, look, here's what the data says on our 14 cameras and all our data points, and here's why I think you should change this. Or through your structural analysis, I don't think you should be doing this because you're going to hurt yourself eventually. So we have to get this worked out. There was no explanation outside of, well, This is how we've done it for many, many years. To
Yeah.
me, that didn't
One
work
of the
very well.
first things I do with a student, like let's say if you're coming for the day, or if you're a season long member in the first session, I will always ask, how much do you want to know the backstory of? Some people just say, just tell me what to do. And some
Mm-hmm.
people just say, take me through the whole thing. I ask
Yeah,
that.
I do something similar in that when the student will ask me something based off how will I know them, or I think I might have developed a feel for if they're analyzing too much or they're reading too much, they're on YouTube too much, and they'll ask me a question, and I will stop and say, do you remember Alice in Wonderland? They said, of course, everyone remembers that story. Of course, if they're a certain age, I say, well, how far down this rabbit hole do you want to go? Because it can go very deep. And we can get to a point where you're going to say, I have no clue what you're talking about. So I can explain it, but I'm going to stop at a certain point because you're just going to look at me like I've got 2 heads and 4 arms, and I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, that's the art of it, right?
Mm-hmm. I found out as I've gotten older, taking a complex topic or a message and making it very simple so that they can implement it and hear it in the same language as I'm speaking it, so that they can get the benefit out of it. It is my greatest accomplishment as their coach, and it's taken me
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
30 years of coaching different people to learn how to get to this point. That's the mystery for me, and the satisfaction that when that happens, when they leave, I feel very, very good about them, that I know that they've got it. You got a few minutes we can do a emergency 9 and we'll wrap up.
Go ahead. Go for it.
Get through. All right. I tell everybody first and the last one, everybody I think that's on the show has gotten, and the ones in between we've changed around over the years. So first one is, if you're playing in a local member guest, or you go, let's say you go down to Brian's club and you guys are going to play in a tournament, and they're going to play some music on the first hole to get everybody really pumped up. What song are they going to play when you walk up to the first hole?
Frankie Valli, Walk Like a Man.
Like a true New Yorker. All right. Hollywood calls you and they say, we've been watching you over the course of your career, and we're really fascinated with it and really impressed, and we're going to make a movie about your life.
God.
And we're going to let you pick what actor plays you. Who are you going to have him pick?
Kevin James.
You're the second person who said him. Very cool person. I have some friends that are actually friends with him. I've never met him myself, but he looks like he'd be a blast.
He grew up in the town next to me growing up.
Is that true? Did you know him, or do you know?
No, I don't know.
Let's see. If you could put a restaurant in your kitchen, any chain or one in particular, what are you going to put in there?
Brick oven pizza.
That was quick. All right. Do you have a favorite training aid? Is there one that you, over the course of your career, have gravitated to that seems like you got a lot of great use from?
The airplane.
The Hobby Lobby airplane.
Yes, the airplane. That's the company line.
Let's see. The best purchase in the last 12 months, best or favorite purchase for under $1,000.
Golf related?
It could be anything. Could be some of them have been a pellet grill, a coffee maker, anything that you just really love and that you bought in the last year. Excuse me.
My new electric toothbrush. It syncs up to an app and you can see your coverage area. Very, very exciting.
Is that the one that shows the time and everything?
Great. Yeah.
Curious to hear your thoughts on this one. The coaching Mount Rushmore. Who would be on the 4 on your mountain?
Golf teachers?
Well, yeah, we'll go golf. If we can go across the board coaches, or we can focus on golf coaches, teachers.
Golf, I think, the pioneers in the beginning. You get your 2 Hall of Famers, John Jacobs and Harvey Pennick. I guess Butch Harmon, David Ledbetter. It made our profession.
I think you'd be hard-pressed for someone to argue those. Those are 4 pretty good ones there. To you, which one is worse? A well-done steak or iron covers?
I love iron covers.
Do you really?
I don't want my irons nicked up. I don't mind a well-done steak. So,
all right, fair enough. Yeah. Would you rather shoot the lowest round you've ever shot, but you used a breakfast ball, or would you rather make a hole-in-one after you just hit one in the water?
Breakfast ball, low round.
That's a new one, so you're the first one to get that. So I don't have any.
I mean, we deserve a breakfast ball at this stage.
There we go. And in your opinion, as far as golfers are concerned, who's the GOAT? Who's the greatest of all time?
Jack Nicklaus.
I'd say I'm very interested in that one as I've done now. I think you're the 158th show. It's very split on age. Anyone probably mid 40s and over, to a large extent, has said Jack Nicklaus. 45 and under has gone heavily with Tiger. Tiger probably has the advantage overall.
2000 Tiger Woods is the greatest golfer ever.
Mm-hmm.
The greatest player ever, I think, is Jack Nicklaus.
Yeah, I would have to agree on with Brando Chambly on that Nicklaus had the better career. Tiger had the better span and golf played. But all things considered, I think he and Jaime Diaz actually had a podcast episode that they did all on that, and it was very interesting because obviously Brando's very good with stats. Whether you agree with them or not on some of his other opinions, I think he does a good job on the stats. And he just went down the list of Nicklaus's career with the top, the runner-ups and the top 3s and 5s and all the way through. And guys are just saying, "Holy cow!" I think there was a video out that one of the major, maybe the PGA, where they handed without knowing who it was, they handed to Rory and all these guys, and they said, "What do you think of this career?" And all these guys are blown away. And I said, that was Jack Nicklaus's record, and it was obviously very impressive. Michael, where can people find you, follow you, get your material?
Jacobs3D.com has everything.
And
I'm making a lot of videos this winter, so I'll have a new fleet of videos for people to watch.
Good. I'll be very curious to watch those. Your YouTube channel, we'll have links to your website, your YouTube channel.
Yeah, I haven't made a YouTube video in almost a year now.
I noticed. It's but you've got some very good stuff on there. It's a good problem to have.
We'll keep adding to it.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll check you next time, Mike. If you hang out just for 1 minute, everybody, we will see you later.